Hello and welcome to That's Just Wild with me, Steve Backshall.
And me, Lizzie Daly.
And me, Sarah Roberts.
The podcast all about nature, wildlife, and how I once got viciously bitten by an anaconda in a Norfolk water park.
As you do.
Vicious.
This
Love it.
week, it's all about the venomous.
Woo. Should we go into it?
Is that your reaction?
Yeah, woo.
Oh, sorry, I was
Venom's
supposed to
huge.
react. I am thrilled.
Venom.
I'm so excited.
Let's go.
Can
Yeah.
I start off with how I always start off talking about venoms and poisons,
Okay.
which is to get past my personal bugbear about the fact that the two terms are used interchangeably.
Yeah, I understand why though.
Yes, so do I. So do I. If
Explain it.
incidentally you are someone that is wanting to have an interchangeable term, then toxin works for everything and additionally makes you sound a bit more clever. So I would just always go with toxic because that kind of works for everything.
Toxic.
Yeah.
Noted.
What about toxic relationships and exes?
In that case, I would know
The
nothing
venomous.
about that.
Venomous.
Nothing
I had a
about that.
venomous ex. Let me get into it. No, I'm kidding. We move on. Can you please explain the difference just for those listening?
So simply put, poison is ingested, venom is injected. So a poison is eaten, a venom is injected into the bloodstream using spines, spurs, fangs, claws, even sharpened ribs in some cases. And the molecules themselves, because of that, are very different. So a venom molecule is quite large. They have lots of proteins, enzymes. They've been evolving for millions of years, but they are quite big molecules, so they can't be absorbed through the skin or inhaled, whereas poisons can be teeny, tiny molecules, and therefore simply breathing them in or drinking them can be lethal. So the way you remember it is, if an animal bites you and you die, then it's venom, and
Yep.
if you bite an animal and you die, then it's poison.
Yeah, or lick an animal.
Or
That's my
lick an animal
fave.
if that's your thing.
What about
Oh, here
Oh,
we
gosh, here we go.
Crumbs.
Things that are both?
things that are both?
Yep.
Things can be both, but also a friend of mine was. I feel like I ought to shout him out since we're on his topic. Harry, Snake Harry, venomologist Harry Francesca Williams, Dr. Harry, got spat in the eye by a cobra.
Ooh.
Venomous or poisonous, because it didn't technically bite him.
It is a venom, though. So that is a venom which has evolved to be injected through the fangs, and the spitting of the venom is a secondary thing that has evolved as a defensive mechanism over time.
We need
So
to
it would
talk about
still
this.
classify as being a venom, and it is going to cause irritation to the eye, but it's not going to have a lethal effect. It's purely localized. There are animals that are both. So, for example, the flamboyant cuttlefish is both venomous and poisonous,
Huh.
but they're few and far between. There's not many animals that have both those things, and they are different. And if you want to really annoy me, then get them wrong.
Blinking heck, don't get it wrong on this one. Steve, you've worked a lot with snakes, but what's your life experience with venom?
So I did a whole series called Venom Hunter, which
You missed
I-
this.
come on.
Lizzie,
Yeah,
did you miss
I did.
this?
I did.
To be
Well,
fair, I can't watch every hour of Steve's show. He's got hundreds of them.
I mean, the sad factor is that the both of you were probably at nursery school when I did this.
What year was it?
No,
figure it
you're
out.
not that old.
I'm not even going to go back there because it just will be so depressing. But venoms and testing out venoms, seeing how they work, has been quite a fascination for me. It's something that I've kind of been really into over time, which makes me sound like a massive, weird, sadomasochist freak. But one experience that I had with venoms, which ended up being quite a life-changing experience, was with something called the bullet ant. So you know what a bullet ant is?
Oh yeah, they're pretty savage. And was this in the Amazon?
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's unique about bullet ants is that, unlike other ants that may bite you, right? These bullet ants actually sting you,
Yes.
and you saw this firsthand.
They bite and sting.
Okay.
So to make the whole effect worse, they bite and then they sting into the bite site. And yeah, so it's the biggest kind of ant in the world and the most painful sting of any insect. So the common name, the bullet ant, comes from the fact that one single sting is said to feel like being shot. Obviously, I haven't been shot, so I haven't got that to compare it with, but I can tell you that one sting is pretty pokey. Have you been stung?
Not by bullet ant, no.
No?
I think closest thing to anything like that is probably fire ants. Accidentally walking into a load of fire ants, which is, but that, I mean, that's minor compared to a bullet ant.
Well, do you know, if you supersize the fire ants are really painful.
Yeah.
If you made them the size of a bullet ant, it would be way worse.
Yeah, do you reckon?
Yeah.
So set the scene, because that's, I mean, it's an extraordinary thing to experience that pain, but
Yes.
why?
Good question. So there is a tribe in the Brazilian Amazon called the Setere Maui, and they have an initiation ceremony where the young boys predominantly can put their hands into a pair of gloves with thousands of bullet ants woven into the gloves with their stingers on the inside, and you get stung to the hands over and over and over again. You dance for about 15 minutes with these gloves on, getting stung over and over and over again. And if you can endure it, then
How long for?
it was about 15 minutes, but it's not in the moment because it's a neurotoxin. It is in the hours afterwards that the pain gets beyond anything that I've ever experienced before. You are in a place where there is nothing in your world apart from pain. It takes over everything else. You're not really aware of people who are sat next to you because the pain is so intense, so overwhelming. I started this by saying that it's the young boys, and when I was there, they said to me, the girls are absolutely allowed to do this, but they don't because they think it's stupid.
So you're tucked into with this tribe in the Amazon,
Yes.
and even women there are going, absolutely not.
They're, going,
Are you
they're
mad?
just going, seriously, boys, grow up.
That is
who
brilliant.
do you honestly think you're proving yourself to?
Oh my God, that's brilliant. So did they ask you to do this as part of kind of like a cultural thing, or was this a mix of you wanted to experience the pain?
I think the reason that this was such a big thing for me was that I was properly invited into the tribe, that I spent a week living with them, getting to know them, becoming friends with them, finding out what it meant to them, getting past the sense that this was just a kind of, pure bit of insane machismo, and getting to the heart of what it was for. And, this has been going on for hundreds of years, and they do it because it gives them a sense of superhuman, overwhelming kind of aura. And I sort of felt that the pain itself was absolutely overwhelming. Interestingly, the only thing that eased the pain was crying. So when I was in absolute paralyzing pain, to burst into floods of tears, that flood of emotions somehow made it better. But the interesting thing is that afterwards, I felt like a god.
Did you really?
Yeah. And I know that it's just like a massive overdose of all of these kind of hormones that you get from that experience. But honestly, I did feel like a superhuman for a couple of days after.
Was that the worst pain you've ever felt?
Yeah.
Really?
Hands down. Yeah.
And afterwards, how long after were you in that state of kind of
So for
crying?
3 hours, there was, like I said, nothing in my world other than pain. For 24 hours, it was like someone was hitting my hands with mallets. And for the week afterwards, it was the best I've ever felt in my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've got
Fascinating.
questions.
Go on then.
I got lots of questions. Firstly, is there any danger of this turning out to be the new ayahuasca? Are we going to get swaths of people that want that experience you just described, and that becomes, like people seeking out to find enlightenment? Are we all going to
Probably
see
after
people
this
attaching
podcast.
ants to their hands now?
I'm not the only person in the world that's done this.
Mm.
In fact, my good friend and adventurer Ed Stafford is off there doing it this week. And it is something that I think a lot of people have looked to, like you say, as a transcendent thing, as something that can take you to a kind of whole different plane of perception.
Yeah.
And I would do it again. If I was offered the opportunity, I'd absolutely do it again, because the experience was so beyond anything I've ever had before, and in the long term, in a good way. So possibly, I guess, is the answer to that.
The other thing is, what happens to the ants?
So the ants, first of all, are anaesthetized. So they're put into they're put into a liquid, which just makes them drowsy, and then they can be picked up and woven into the gloves. I didn't see what happened afterwards, but to be honest, they're in perfectly good state, so they could just be released back into the wild again.
Nobody's
Isn't it with
picking those
cashew? It's like a
ants.
natural sedation. There's like a cashew leaf
Yeah.
or nuts, or
Yeah.
I can't exactly remember how they do it, but I think they're absolutely fine afterwards.
one of the interesting things from a biological perspective is that they do not use their sting when they're hunting. They use their jaws. The sting is defensive, and it has evolved through deep time. Ants are an ancient group. They've been around for hundreds of millions of years. It has evolved solely for the purpose of causing pain. This is an ant that lives in relatively small colonies, usually just a few hundred insects, rather than the tens or hundreds of thousands you might get from something like a leafcutter ant. And effectively, what they are doing is they are able to have one single ant deliver a sting to something big like a tapir, for example, that makes that tapir believe it is being put under enormous physical threat, and therefore walks away,
Awesome.
leaves the nest, doesn't disturb it any further. So that venom has evolved over tens of millions of years to target the things in your body that experience pain, to create the greatest pain you are capable of experiencing. And it works.
I don't want to make this a gender thing, but still, even though we know all of that, you've still got men sticking their hands in bullet ant gloves. Do you know what I
Rather
mean?
than just crying, you mean?
How does it
I'm
compare
joking,
to
I'm joking,
childbirth? Is
Steve,
what
I'm
I want to
joking.
know.
Oh, well, I mean, with women,
Seems like
we
give it a rest.
Yeah.
I honestly, I think you're absolutely right. Almost all these initiation ceremonies around the world, almost all, are from guys. And seriously, get over
No,
it.
I mean, we are joking, of course, because obviously there's cultural significance in this.
Yeah.
And what a thing to experience, something that we'll never get to do, maybe, if we're lucky enough. one
You
day.
are joking, but the equivalent in Wales is guys in a rugby club drinking 20 pints and
Nothing wrong with it. We've all got our ways of having pain and crying. Anyway, definitely haven't been stung by a bullet ant, but I have spent time in Australia looking at box jellyfish. So my jellyfish journey began right here in the UK when I came across a giant barrel jellyfish however many years ago, early on in my career, came across this beautiful barrel, which was probably the same length as me. And then I went down this wormhole of learning about jellies and how there's still so much we don't know about them. And I guess lots of misconceptions and misunderstandings about what they are, where they go, how they feed. Turns out they're not just big old blobs. They have quite deliberate, sophisticated movements and very good at administering or delivering venom, right? Some of the best.
before we go any further, can you promise me that my jellyfish journey is going to be your magnum opus? My octopus teacher, forget it. Your Oscar-winning documentary or book or
Jellyfish
podcast, should you choose to, My
Journey.
Jellyfish Journey.
Oh,
Am I right?
God. You know, if my career's going down the pan, I'll make a show called My Jellyfish Journey.
What's wrong with that? I think it's genius.
I love it. So, while I was out there, the whole aim was to try and film a little bit on the Great Barrier Reef, and then we were going to meet up with Jamie Seymour, who's a venom expert specifically with box jellies. So we had a day to shoot. We went out on the boat, and this was my first experience on the Great Barrier Reef. So naturally, so excited to actually hang out. I know you've been, Steve. Have you been, Sarah?
Yep.
And?
It's great. It's a big barrier reef. A lot of divers there. Been a few times. No, it's a good coral reef
It is.
in places.
Yeah.
Bit unfortunately hit by a few other external factors in others, but we love it. Great Barrier Reef.
Do you realise you are never going to be able to go back to Australia?
Yeah, and sometimes things leave my mouth, and I'm like, someone needs to film for me.
Anyway,
they're
so-
barrier
yeah.
reef. It's all right.
know,
It's some
do
coral.
you know what?
It's
There's
quite
some
big.
epic spots on the Great Barrier Reef, but for me, even when I lived in Australia, like when I was 18, I was shocked at how much bleaching had happened even then, and now even more so. So for me, like
And also, you're a marine biologist, right? So your background's
background's
used
marine,
To,
yeah.
She's used to reef. She's seen it all.
Yeah, but then I see it, and then there's the environmental journalist kicks in, and I just sit and I'm like, oh, panic. So it's different experiences, but it's great. It's the Great Barrier
Okay,
Reef.
so we've got a thumbs up from Sarah. Steve, similar
Oh,
experience?
double thumbs up.
Yeah,
No,
okay.
absolutely.
So, I mean, for those who don't know much about it or haven't been, it's an extraordinary place. I'd also argue the Ningaloo Reef is just as extraordinary
Yeah,
for different reasons,
yeah.
which we won't go into now. But yeah, I mean, had a whole day out. So I had this kind of 1 millimeter thick wetsuit on with the arms cut off, got in the water, and I must have been in the water for about 8 hours that day. It was something ridiculous. We were filming the moon jellyfish and then the corals and then the wrasse, and it was just like this full, for me, a wonderful introduction. But by the end of the day, I pretty much had sunstroke and was just like in the worst way ever. Anyway, next day, we go to meet Jamie Seymour. I'm telling him about the wonders of the Barrier Reef and how wonderful it is to be there. He's just looking at me and just colours like draining from his face. He's like, "What do you mean you were snorkeling? Do you have a stinger suit on?" I was like, "No." And then I actually had my arms exposed to the water.
Irriganji.
And he was like, "That's the place where we literally survey for irrikanji, this box jellyfish species that can be as small as your thumb, really, really small, thumbnail even."
Totally clear as well.
Yeah, and I was just like, "Woohoo, moon jellies!" for a whole day, completely unaware. Made extra special because we then went to do a little survey collecting the jellyfish, literally meters from shore. And how he does it, he kind of gets this net, he walks out 10 metres and then walks parallel along the beach. I hold the other end, and we essentially just net the shallows to see if there's anything there. And the water's murky, we're knee-deep in water, and there he picks up a Chironex fleckeri, which is another species of box jellyfish. But if you get 2 metres of that tentacle on you, you're dead within 60 seconds.
So, firstly, we can talk about why they're dangerous.
Yeah.
I had this told to me while in the Great Barrier Reef last summer. I had the Aussie guys, told me a story. They were saying that the dangerous thing about being stung by an irriganji or a box jelly isn't necessarily the initial sting, but it's actually the first thing that they do when you get up on the boat is the boat captains will drop any spears, they'll chuck everything over the side that is pointed, anything that you could harm yourself with, because it's not actually necessarily the sting that kills you, it's you trying to end yourself because of the pain. Is that real or no real?
So one of the things is that if you are stung by irrikanji, which is a teeny tiny box jellyfish, that yes, the pain is completely overwhelming, but it comes with something called irrikanjiism or irrikanji syndrome, and that comes with a whole array of really severe mental factors, one of which is a sense of impending doom, a
Right.
sense that the world is going to come to an end.
So it's real.
It is
Yeah,
real. It's 100%
very
real.
real.
The pain thing is also real. So I have tested a small piece of Chironex fleckeri tentacle on my forearm, just a small piece, really carefully
You
to
are
find
a
out how it
little
works.
bit-
Why?
And it is like someone taking a heating iron and pressing it into your flesh. The pain is absolutely excruciating. And as Lizzie absolutely says, were you to receive a long portion of tentacle
Yeah.
to your leg or to an arm, that is covered with what are called nematocysts, these tiny stinging cells within which is effectively a harpoon and a thread off the end of it, and then it's packed with this incredibly intense venom. Itself, not the most toxic venom in the world, but those nematocysts could fire off in their hundreds of thousands. There is no animal that has the power to stop a human heart faster than a box jellyfish. And yes, overwhelming pain, and then these psychological symptoms too. It's intense.
And now I'm going to add to that because in my wormhole on my jellyfish journey, I started to then ask Jamie about Chironex fleckeri, and they are so sophisticated. They've got 24 eyes. They have a lens, so they're actually able to see light and dark, identify prey. At nighttime, they drop down to the bottom of to the seafloor to essentially sleep. They can swim faster than an Olympic swimmer. I mean, they are just the most extraordinary animals. I feel like I'm scaring the lights out of anyone listening to this, but I think it's just a really interesting kind of topic and area of research in jellyfish, because we often just think jellies, stingy, the worst. Also, very interesting reading about how they're dangerous to humans, but maybe not to other animals as well. So turtles obviously love a jelly. And supposedly they were opening up the inside of a turtle's and the stomach contents, and none of those nematocysts had fired. So somehow all those tentacles and those harpoon-like structures weren't triggered by that process of going into the mouth, which we know is kind of a little bit different, very spiky, very different to ours, but then down the esophagus and the system of a turtle. It's just a very odd thing which has evolved, which no one knows why or how. They're not stinging turtles and they are stinging us.
It's worth saying at this point that one of the most intriguing things about this, we're saying stuff that sounds so frightening that would make anyone who just tuned into this podcast by mistake think the natural world is out to get us and is evil. But very few people in Australia are harmed by box jellyfish because they learn the rules, they learn the season when they're there. You don't go out unless you're wearing a stinger suit. And you can, incidentally,
Mostly.
use pantyhose.
What?
It works.
Steve,
Just old-fashioned tights.
don't make it weird.
Why not? I mean, come on. I'm wearing mine right now. But anything that provides a barrier between your organic skin and the tentacles of the jellyfish will stop it firing off and you won't get stung. And people learn the rules. They learn how to behave when it's stinger season. They're either swimming in the stinger nets or they're not swimming at all. And we have this incredibly cosseted feel in this country because we haven't got anything really nasty, that anything like that is going to make life unbearable. Well, in Australia, people learn to live with it. They learn to live alongside it. They learn the rules. They are adjusted to living in an environment that has sketchy stuff.
Yeah.
Speaking of the rules, last reel or no reel, can you pee on it and it stops stinging?
You can pee on it if you want.
No, come on.
Go on, that for the tale as old as
If
time. You
that's
get
your
stung by a
thing,
jellyfish.
Sarah,
Somebody's
you
going to
feel
come along
free.
and pee on you. Real or no real?
It's a bit of a myth and a bit of a legend. I mean, I think lots of people have actually gone out and probably peed on their friends because it is a well-known thing. That, and then across the beaches in Australia, you'll also find these bottles of vinegar as well. The whole concept of peeing or vinegar or hot water, which is kind of the new peeing, if you like, is that it denatures those nematocysts, actually stops them firing. So the problem with peeing on it is you don't really know the chemical composition of pee, and it varies. And I actually think it only applies, from my understanding, to some stings and not others. So not all box jellies actually doesn't work for all of them. So the best thing to do is not to pee on your mates, but instead wash it with seawater, pick off any tentacles with some tweezers, just make sure they're all kind of removed so they don't continue to fire. And then they say go and seek medical advice or assistance, because even hot water, I'm not sure how effective it is.
So
do we know?
The short answer is that the vote isn't in. So 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if you'd been to any Australian beach where there were going to be lots of people and where there were going to be potential stings, then you'd have vinegar up everywhere, and that is what people would use. And then it started getting called into question because it was quite clear that in some cases the vinegar was making it worse and it wasn't helping. And that particularly if you agitate those nematocysts in any way, ones that hadn't fired off before will fire off now. So anything that you do to that could potentially make it worse. That could be hot water, it could be urine, it could be vinegar. So there are some jellyfish stings that vinegar definitely helps with. There are some that it will at least do nothing, and some that it will make it worse, which is not particularly helpful if you're at the beach. So what you need to do is do what Lizzie said. Take the tentacles off if there are still any there as carefully as possible. Get someone to help quickly, and don't try and do anything else yourself.
Except throw away any pointed objects immediately.
Throw away pointed objects.
I love that. It's just like boat full of people throwing away spears. Oh, fascinating. I could talk about box jellyfish all day long.
Well, should we talk a little bit about how venom came to be? Because it's a really massive and interesting subject. How old is venom? How long has it been around? How long have animals had these protective toxins that they use as a way of defending themselves or of taking on their prey? And the answer is a very, very long time.
Yeah, and it's very complex, isn't it? It's a powerful evolutionary tool, and we've seen it evolve across multiple lineages in the animal kingdom, multiple species we've already mentioned.
What you said there is exactly right. It has evolved completely independently in animal groups that are not even closely related, be that in the ants, bees and wasps, or in the jellyfish, or even in mammals. There are mammals that have venom. We
Platypus.
even have our... Platypus is one, Solenodon, shrews, slow loris. We have a primitive venom ourselves in our saliva, in our amylase in our saliva.
But is it venom?
It is kind of the beginning point.
Yes.
So the amylase in our saliva, which begins the digestive process before food goes into our stomachs, is effectively the enzyme that you get in snakes, which has just become more and more effective over time and been added to with all kinds of other enzymes and proteins until it has many diverse functions. But to begin with, it was just something that made it easier to eat your food.
Yeah. In simple terms, it's like modified saliva, isn't it? And that's exactly what you see in the snake family. There's just all these different modified salivas, essentially.
But it is in snakes and lizards and octopuses, but it most certainly isn't in ants and wasps and bees. So it has no, as far as we can tell, universal common ancestor. It's something that has evolved multiple times in lots and lots of different kinds of animals for different purposes and different reasons. It has different ways of working in the bodies of the animals that it is used against. It is a mega topic.
Mm-hmm.
So there could be some truth in it then when somebody says, gosh, you've got a venomous tongue on you.
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is that something said to you often, Sarah?
No, I can't say. It's more something I maybe think in my head every now and again.
So these proteins that you talk about, obviously they're honed by natural selection over time. Should we talk about the different types of venom? The one probably most people are aware of is the neurotoxic venom, right? And that targets typically the nervous system. We've also got hemotoxic venom, which is all about the blood. So it impacts clotting and then clotting factors as well. Have you had any experience with neurotoxics?
Yeah, so
Directly?
scorpions predominantly are neurotoxic.
Yeah.
I have been stung several times by scorpions. And there are several different ways that neurotoxins can represent in the animal that's stung. That can be in incredible pain.
Mm-hmm.
It can be in a slowdown in respiratory function. It can be in fluttering of the eyes. It can be in a total inability to move. It can be in an absolute overstimulation of movement. There are lots and lots of different ways that it can represent. Bullet ant venom is packed full of neurotoxins.
Yeah.
And then classically things like the cobra family, the taipans, the tiger snakes, the sea snakes, the true cobras all have neurotoxins in their venoms. And it is the one which is most likely to create a really severe and quick death in the
yeah.
animal that is going to be administered to.
Well, speaking of snakes, we've talked about venom, anti-venom. It's important because around the world, around 600 different species of snake can cause deaths, 100,000 deaths a year, and 300,000 permanent cases of disabilities a year caused by snakes. So it is a big market. Anti-venom's important. It could save a lot of lives.
I think it's really interesting to note that now, in this day and age, the way that we get anti-venom
Yeah.
is the same way that we have done for decades, and it is a really brutal, expensive process where venom is injected into horses or beagles, dogs, and they develop antibodies which are harvested and then pretty much injected neat as the anti-venom. It itself is a very toxic substance.
Yeah.
So you can have an allergic reaction to an anti-venom that could kill you. And the whole process is just antiquated and
Yeah.
outdated. And most of the antivenoms that are created are what are called monovalent. They only work for one species, and sometimes only one species in a very specific area. And if you were to take that into a different district, it might not work. It certainly won't work with a different kind of snake.
I want to talk to you about Tim Fried. He's made it his mission to create the universal anti-venom. He is, I think fair to say, quite a controversial figure, especially in the world of venomology. Tim Fried is an amateur scientist who sort of set up his own study on himself inadvertently. He has purposefully been bitten over 200 times by snakes and injected
Wow.
himself over 700 times with venom of varying concentrations of varying different species.
There's lots of reasons why it's controversial. First
So
of all
many.
is that he absolutely didn't start doing this in order to
Mhm,
create an
I didn't
antivenom.
want to say it. I
That's,
didn't want to be
you
the
know,
person that said it, but he's definitely seemingly gets a large kick from doing it. There's a lot of YouTube videos that he says, and he's like, I love it,
Yeah.
as he's doing it. And as you've just described then, when you were talking about the bullet ant, all I could think is this must be addictive.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there probably was a sense in that he was trying to find out if he could make himself immune. That has been something that has been talked about often in popular culture and in science, that you could administer small amounts, small doses of a particular venom and make yourself immune to it. Whereas in real life, what usually happens is the exact opposite. So people who work with venomous snakes a lot and have been bitten once or twice tend to be super, super susceptible to the venoms to an extent where even a tiny amount could be toxic and kill them. So the idea that you could microdose and become immune has usually been treated with utter contempt and scorn in the scientific community. And this
This is a weird
turnaround,
one.
which has happened recently, completely blows my mind and is just the most incredible bit of serendipity that could save millions of lives.
Well, he, as we said, he started off his original YouTube channel, Lizzie, is literally him just seemingly getting a bit of a kick out of it. Anyway, he accidentally is milking his snakes. He's had a few shots of tequila, in his own words, and he gets bitten by a cobra, and he's okay because he's got immunity, which seemingly he kind of does. You're watching the videos, I would kind of believe it. But then, because he's had a few tequila shots, he then, like Steve, goes, I could do that again. And he does do it again and ends up in a coma for 4 days. But as you said, there's been a breakthrough recently. His blood has been used in studies
Interesting.
to create a universal antivenom. But I must add,
Don't do this at home.
don't do this at home, absolutely. But essentially, there's this new drug that was developed, which was an anti-inflammatory, which has also made mind-blowing discoveries in the anti-venom world. And actually, that's been used in trials all over the shop. And they've just kind of mixed that with his blood antibodies as well, and then tested that on mice, and they have seen results. But how much of that is him and how much of that is the drug, I don't know. But it's causing waves, isn't it, in the venom world?
It is very, very exciting because, as Sarah said, the numbers of people who are killed around the world by snakes is massively underreported. It is an epidemic that is taking tens of thousands of lives, and particularly in places like India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Brazil, where you have people who are still living rural lives, spending a lot of time walking around barefoot in the fields, where there's lots of sit and wait, particularly viperid snakes. They get bites to the lower limb. The primary care is poor. The access to hospitals might be poor. And snake bite deaths are way, way higher in number than we have been led to expect.
It's huge, yeah.
So having an anti-venom that could be easily created, that could be synthetic, that could be reproduced across the world,
A game changer.
is a game changer.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about venom, and the obvious one is snakes. Then we think about scorpions and obviously some fish species. But the one that I don't think we talk about as much, and it's actually a global health threat now. It's considered a global health threat. That's caterpillars.
Really?
Yes.
Why is it global health?
So I don't know if you've heard of the toxic toupee. It literally is the cutest looking caterpillar I think I've ever seen. It's super furry. It's really cute. It's got little legs underneath, and it looks like this. I mean, they can be brown, but they can be green, they can be yellow. They're all different colours, but they're fluffy.
And they're venomous.
And they fall out of trees, sometimes onto people's heads, and they are venomous. Yeah, really venomous. They have spikes, and that's how they're venomous. But yeah, they're becoming a bigger problem also with climate change because their territories are moving.
Yeah.
So on expedition in South America, my ropes safety guy, Tim Fogg, brushed up against one on his arm. And to begin with, kind of, it's a bit like a sort of stinging nettle kind of sting. And around the campfire that night, he could barely move. He was in so much pain, and it carried on hurting for 3 months after he was stung.
What?
Yeah. It's serious. And we have a lot of caterpillars, particularly like the processionary moth caterpillars, which are have those same kinds of hairs and are spreading all over the world. A lot of them are they're in pot plants and things, and they'll get exported to different parts of the world. They're starting to expand in number, and therefore, yes, it is absolutely a potential global problem.
It's just like the snakes as well, because we don't have an antivenom. There's only one species of caterpillar that we have an antivenom for, but there are a few different species that are very highly toxic. And so again, lots of money in this.
I know I asked you before, but I can't remember exactly what you said. You've probably got lots of experience with venomous animals, but do you have any standouts?
Yeah, so hemotoxins, you mentioned there. And the famous snakes that have hemotoxins would be something like Russell's viper, which has extraordinary coagulant factors in its venoms. And I have milked eastern brown snakes in Australia that have those same factors, taken some of my blood and mixed it with the venom, and instantly, not in my body, instantly in a petri dish, it turns to red snot. Ooh. It coagulates into a lump of red jelly within seconds.
And is that because of the potency of that venom of the eastern browns? Because they're the second most venomous, right? So is that because of the amount and the potency, or
they don't have a particularly high venom yield, eastern browns, but yes, the toxicity is sky high, and that coagulating factor is stratospherically potent, and it's so quick. It blows your mind how quickly it just literally turns into strawberry jelly in a dish. And imagine that happening in your body.
No.
You've just brought me back to Tim, because another one of those Tim stories is that he has self-amputated part of his finger when he got bitten by one particular snake and it went wrong, but also claims he has self-amputated 40 pounds of his own muscular flesh on his leg when he doesn't like doctors, apparently.
I'm glad you touched on that, because the other very well-known toxic venom is called cytotoxic venom. That destroys cells and tissues. And then you might have also heard of myotoxic venom, and that damages muscle tissues, which explains his crazy behaviour. I don't want to bring down the mood, but can we just very quickly talk about Brazilian wandering spiders, just as a final note of making this whole thing very weird?
I feel like this almost should have been a Halloween episode. Go on, give us something else to think about.
So
Can you take this one?
Yes, I can. I very much can. So the Phenutria spiders, the wandering spiders from South America, have an extraordinary venom, which has a side effect of causing long-lasting and incredibly painful priapisms in men.
Do you know what that is?
No, I'm just smiling and nodding. What is it?
Guess. In men.
Like okay.
Yes, which
Right.
sounds like it could be a lot of fun, but results afterwards in total loss of sexual function. However, there is a possibility that we could tinker with the venom of the wandering spider to create
A new
an
version of
alternative little
Viagra.
blue pill for the future.
No.
And the way we have to surely end this podcast is the potential for Venomous, what
yeah.
they
Oh,
could
yeah.
achieve in the future in pharmacology.
Yeah.
I mean, venom is so different than all of our synthetic drugs because it's adapted for so many millions of years, specifically for biological functions. The reason that I wanted to talk to you about that particular caterpillar is because there's hope that they may be useful in cancer treatment, because the venom, it destroys the cell wall. And if you
Yeah.
can redirect those venom qualities, and I think it's not just caterpillar that we're looking at for this, we've looked at snake venom and all sorts of things, but the opportunities to cure so many different human diseases and animal diseases are so vast if we just figure out, well, I mean, I say we just figure out, it seems like quite a hard process.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting area of science. The venom that I studied for my my academic studies also destroys cancer cells, as many venoms do. Unfortunately, it also kills everything else as well.
Yeah.
But finding some that can target those cells it's the holy grail of bioscience. And there are so many drugs that are already on the market that come from animal venoms. There's one incredible one that comes from the venom of the cone shell, the world's most venomous snail, which is said to be thousands of times more potent than morphine as a pain-relieving drug and also non-addictive.
Yeah. Is that TTX? Is it
TTX is tetrodotoxin.
Because
That's
I've heard
not
that
a
as
drug.
well.
That's a venom.
Yeah, so I've heard that they've used TTX as a medical grade painkiller. Apparently it's a really good potential drug for humans and managing pain as well. So the uses are endless, really, aren't they? And an incredible thing to think, venom that a lot of us have feared, as I've teed up with box jellyfish stories, actually can be massively valuable to us in our everyday.
Bee venom for allergies. That's a good one.
Yeah.
There's Gila monster venom is being used as a heart drug. The venom of the Russell's viper as an anticoagulant. There's already massive drugs that are on the market that are saving people's lives that come from venom. So I would say anyone out there who's heard anything scary in this episode that made you think that the natural world is just trying to kill you, there are ways that it could save you too.
Yeah, and Tim's there leading the way. That's it. I think we all have time for. You'll have a Q&A episode coming your way on Friday, which is super exciting. So remember to send your questions, please, to questions@thatsjustwild.com, and we will get right to it.
That's right, and we are a fledgling baby bird of a show, so any support is really welcome. You can follow us on your favourite podcast app, leave us a review, it makes all the difference to our whole team. And for ad-free listening, our newsletter, special deep dive episodes and members-only benefits, you can subscribe to us at thatsjustwild.com. That's thatsjustwild.com. We're also on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and you can find us at That's Just Wild Pod. And any of your questions as well, if you've got crazy questions you've always wanted to know about animals, just put them on any of those things. We'll find them, we'll answer them.
Well, that's all we've got time for. So thanks for listening. And hopefully we'll see you next week.